Everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us once again for our weekly Saddleback webinars. If you are if this is your first webinar with us, make sure you locate your control panel. We have some helpful tips here on the screen for you. My name is Liz Mangus. I'm the literacy specialist here at Saddleback, and with me is Jill Haney, our speaker for today. And we'll talk to her in just a minute, but just for some housekeeping tips, your control panel looks like that long gray rectangle that you see there in the picture, and that is where you will be able to access any handouts and resources that we're sharing with you today, as well as that's where you will find your Q&A screen, where you'll be able to type in and ask any questions that you may have. And there's also your audio option. There is the blue button. Make sure that's on, otherwise you won't be able to hear all this great information we have for you today. As usual, at the conclusion of the webinar, if for some reason you're not able to find your control panel, don't worry about it. When the webinar concludes, usually a couple of hours later, we will send a recording of the webinar along with a certificate of attendance. So yes, you will receive a certificate of attendance and any attachments and handouts or resources that we are discussing today. So as you're getting settled in, let's say hi to Jill. Jill, how is it going? Where are you? What's new? What you been up to?
Well, I think like so many of the folks that are here on the webinar with us, I'm at home. I'm in Colorado and have both of my kids are remote learning and have been now for over a month. And we are looking at school will be closed through the end of the school year. So we've got about 4 weeks, actually 4 weeks from today, because May 20th will be our last official day of school. So we had snow last week, but this week we're in the 60s. So I'm hopeful that we actually are to spring now for real. How are you doing?
That's a pretty common theme I'm hearing. My family, they're in the Buffalo, New York area, and they're saying it's still snowing here. This is crazy. So yeah, I know you guys must be getting tired of that. Things are moving right along here in Texas. The weather is a lot nicer than Colorado right now. It's not snowing, so that's good. But yeah, the same. My daughter's school will be wrapping up in about a month. And we're working diligently trying to figure out the whole remote learning thing. And it's a challenge, but we're just doing what we can and keeping a positive attitude. So that's what we can do, and take advantage of all these learning and professional development opportunities that are available via webinar these days. So yeah, we're just trying to make the best of it.
Absolutely. And your daughter is first grade?
She's in first grade, yes. So not a situation where we can stick her on the Chromebook and tell her to just do it. Like she needs a lot of guidance. So we make it work. I don't know how we're doing it, but we're somehow managing. Every day is a blur at this point. So
yeah, I mean, my daughter is a junior, so she's pretty grateful right now that she's a junior and not a senior. She has a lot of friends who are seniors who are very sad about what they are not going to be able to have this spring. But our district actually has announced that they're going to try to do a regular graduation ceremony in July, as long as they're able to. So the seniors at least know that they have that to look forward to. And of course, if things change, that can always change, as we know, depending on what's going on in the world at the time. But they are committed to trying to have a full graduation ceremony. But for my daughter, the big question in the next month is going to be how these AP tests that are going to be given at home will go. And then, as you know, I also have a son, and it's a completely different side of the world because he has special needs and is nonverbal and has autism. So remote learning has been a real challenge for him because he misses the hands-on that he would get in his classroom each and every day. So yeah, this is a challenging time for sure.
Absolutely. I think well, it's great that your district is trying to plan in like a formal graduation ceremony. I know a lot of kids are upset about, prom and that kind of thing being canceled. And we also probably have a lot of people who are joining us who they may be tasked with trying to plan virtual events, virtual promotion ceremonies, virtual graduations, and that is on top of trying to stay engaged with students and online learning as well. So it's a challenge, but we're all in it together. We have about 1 minute until we start. So we have about, it looks like 380-ish and climbing quickly, people who are joining us. So if you are just logging on, please locate your control panel. This is where you will be able to access any handouts and resources that we are sharing with you today, as well as ask questions and locate your volume as well. So with that being said, it is 3 o'clock Eastern time, so it is time to begin our content. For those of you who are new to Saddleback webinars, I am Liz Mangus and I'm a literacy specialist. Today we have with us our very own Director of Literacy, Jill Haney. Jill has been with Saddleback since 2013, is that right?
That's right, Liz.
2013, okay, yes. My Saddleback employee trivia is pretty sharp these days. So Jill is a teacher, middle school teacher, lots of experience teaching middle school students. She is an author. She writes a lot of our fantastic Saddleback books, and she is a speaker and presenter as well. So you may have seen Jill at one of many national or state conferences, sharing her knowledge and helping you reach your students with reading comprehension strategies and Hi-Lo books. So we are thrilled to have her here today to discuss social story narratives, which are going to be a fabulous resource for you to use with your students during this time. So Jill, welcome and take it away.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. This is a real treat for me to be able to present this particular webinar because it really has emerged out of my own experiences with my son, who is a 9th grader and who has special needs, is nonverbal, and therefore we really had to do a lot of figuring out how this remote learning was going to work best for him. And one of the things that we've seen that's been very, very successful for him have been social stories or social narratives. So today we're going to be talking about social story narratives, not only for students with special needs, but also as a great tool for our students who are learning English, and really any student who may be really confused and struggling about why all of these routines and school, why have schools closed, what's going on, what am I expected to do at home? And this is really where something like the social story narratives can come into play. I am thrilled to tell you that I will be premiering 2 narratives that I wrote in this particular webinar, and they are free to you. And so we will definitely dive into those as well as part of today. So let's kind of start though with where we're at right now. School closures are across the board. In fact, I read a headline this morning about 90% of students around the world are currently facing school closures and having to learn from home. Here in the United States, that's 55.1 million K through 12 students who are affected by school closures, and 7.5 million of those students have IEPs or have identified special needs that have a plan, a program that really talks about what they need for individualized instruction. 5 million of those students are English learners, and as we all know, some of those students are going to be both English learners and have an IEP. And it's when we talk about these groups of students who have IEPs or who are English learners, that we particularly are talking about some of our most vulnerable students, that we really have to think, how can we make sure that we're meeting their individual needs when we are in a remote learning situation? How remote learning looks is really different depending on the district and depending on the students' access to learning materials as well as to internet. So we're seeing some students right now who are on their laptops or mobile devices and having literally virtual classroom experiences. And we're seeing other students who have no internet access, who really are having to figure out how can they get packets or other kind of paper pencil tasks, projects that they can do and work from at home at their own pace and with the help of their family. So what this all looks like, again, is just so varied across the country. And it also is really changing the way we see student engagement. When we talk about our students and our learners, what does engagement look like? Well, it can be so different depending upon the learner themselves and how they best really learn and take in information. We have students who need to truly be in a hands-on learning situation. Just hearing things, just seeing things isn't enough. They need those manipulatives. They need ways to be able to truly interact. We have students who have a language barrier or who have a language disability who are going to struggle with some of that communication unless there can be a visual component to it. And so when we think about our students with special needs, our English learners, our newcomers, and our students with no internet access, this is really one of the premier questions that I see happening right now, is the idea of equity. How can we make sure that through remote learning, we are still meeting the needs of all? And so I really want to, at this point, kind of take a look at our audience today. We've got a number of you with us, almost 600 online right now. And I would like to hear how the engagement is for your students. So the students that you're responsible for, that you're working with. Liz, if you would put up the poll. What we want to know here is how many of your students, roughly, would you say are engaged right now in remote learning? Is that 100%? Is it more than 80%? Is it more than half? Or is it less than half? So let's take a few moments and let everybody have a chance to answer this poll question.
Okay, we've got some responses coming in. We'll give it about 15 to 20 more seconds. I want to give everybody a chance to cast their vote here.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll and see where we land. Jill, it looks like we have 41% who are saying that less than 50% are engaged, and the next closest is 31% saying that more than 50%. So it's a pretty even split between less than 50 and more than 50. Well, it's, I would say 41%.
50, but less than 80. And
there you go.
Yeah, just there's still representatives there that are talking about 100% engagement and more than 80, but by far the majority is less than 50 or between 50 and 80%. And this is something, as when we talk about this whole idea of equity, that is the big question, right? if we have that kind of disparity in terms of engagement right now with our students, what can we say they are learning in this moment? And so I like to be able to take a moment to say, guess what? This is a challenge that we are all facing. And look at the extreme challenge for those of you who are saying, those 41% of you are saying less than half of your students are engaged in remote learning. It can start to feel overwhelming, like this is an insurmountable challenge. But we need to always remember we went into this profession with a dream and a purpose of helping students. And even in this moment when we are having to learn new ways to reach our students, we have to keep a moment to pat ourselves on the back and say, we can do this. It may take learning some new tools, it may take some creative ways to reach students, but we can accomplish this. We can help our students continue to learn even when they're not in school with us. One of the things that I have found has been critical for particularly a student who is in that at-risk kind of category, like my own son who has autism, is nonverbal, is normally in a self-contained classroom. Social stories have been a huge help, and I have seen this across the board with our most vulnerable students, how important this kind of format is for our students. Social stories as a term really originated in the field of special education. It came out of trying to develop curriculum and helped texts for students with autism. And the idea being that many times our students with autism may struggle to understand other points of view, and they need to have things more personalized. So you'll see in the social stories this kind of first-person narrative like you see in this example here, and you'll see them describing a concept or a skill that we want the students to master in a very positive way. And visuals are a huge piece of social stories so that students can also kind of draw that visual understanding as they read the social stories. So you can see here we have an example of a social story where we're saying, I will learn at home. My teacher will send me schoolwork to do. There are times I might log in and talk to my teacher. This is a very common kind of social story talk in the original intention because we want that student to really positively affirm that they can do it, that they are able to do these things. When we see our social stories, what we've seen is also a growth in how this might look. And one of the ways that we've seen some of them try to kind of grow beyond just where that original plan was is the idea of moving to narratives. Narratives may not be first person, they can be second person, they can be third person kinds of things. But the key here again is helping students navigate unfamiliar situations and modeling how to do that in a positive way so that we are always staying very positive, very upbeat as we work through these new concepts or skills or situations. The other thing I love about social story narratives is that they provide an opportunity to talk or to communicate how individuals are feeling. So when we think about a child like my son who's nonverbal, or we think about a newcomer who has no English, and they are struggling not only with all the changes that have happened in their routine, they're also struggling with how do I share what I'm feeling inside? How can we talk through this? And using a social story narrative can be a tremendous tool for helping to bridge that gap and have some communication. Ultimately, these are going to set students up for success, which is what we all want to see. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to really help as best we could by providing 2 social narratives about situations and topics right now that our students are wondering about and asking about. So we have 2 social narratives that we want to premiere in today's webinar. The first one is about understanding the coronavirus, and the second one is about remote learning, from home. And so I want to now introduce you to the first one, understanding the coronavirus, exactly how I might do this if I was presenting these to my students as a teacher, and taking some time to discuss as well as to read. So here we have understanding the coronavirus. Daily life has changed across the US. Leaders have ordered people to stay at home. And we can only imagine how our students are getting their information right now. It might be that they're seeing a lot of TV news, or they may not be. But we know that families are trying to navigate what's happening. How do we know what is going on out in the world? Schools are closed. Most businesses are too. People are working from home. Why have things changed? Think about our students. I think this is a question that they are all wondering. Why have things changed? It is because of a new virus that spreads very quickly. A virus causes an infection in the body. It makes people sick. This virus is a coronavirus. These kinds of viruses cause respiratory illness. That means they make it hard for people to breathe. And so we see here in this visual a person's lungs, and this idea of ultimately this particular virus can get into the lungs and then make it very difficult for people to breathe. This coronavirus first appeared in late 2019. The illness it causes is called COVID-19. 2 of the symptoms are a fever and coughing. Most people who get sick will get better. They will likely feel very tired for several days. Many will have a high fever too. The virus makes some people very sick. They have a hard time breathing. Then they have to go to the hospital. Many go on machines to help them breathe. Some die. And when I was writing this particular social story narrative, one of the things that I really wanted to make sure we addressed is that, in fact, we do have people who are succumbing to this illness. And we don't know if our students already have a family member or already have an acquaintance they know who has died because of COVID-19, and acknowledging that this is indeed happening is an important part of helping our students. It is easy to spread this virus. One way it spreads is through coughing and sneezing. Droplets in the air carry the virus. People nearby can breathe them in. The closer people are to each other, the more easily the virus spreads. And I have to tell you, every time I see this particular photo, I really, really get reinforced about how important it is to cover sneezes and coughs. That is why leaders want people to stay at home. People should only go out when they really need something, like food. When out, they should stay at least 6 feet from each other. This is called social distancing. Here is one way to practice social distancing. Think about the width of a car. That is about 6 feet. Stay about a car's width away from other people. And this is so important when we are dealing with social narratives, to have these kind of visual ways to help reinforce positive behaviors. In this case, how we want to stand when we are out in public. Staying at home helps everyone. It slows the spread of the virus. That gives scientists more time to come up with ways to beat the virus. There are other things you can do to stay healthy. Washing your hands is very important. This kills the virus. Touching your face can make it easier for the virus to spread. Try to keep your hands away from your face. If you have to cough, cover your mouth with your arm. Cover your sneezes too. This is good to do all the time. It is very important right now. And certainly, this is an opportunity for us to really reinforce those kind of positive behaviors for our students to stay healthy. For now, our best plan is to stop the spread of the virus. Staying at home is key. It keeps you from getting the virus, and it also keeps others safe. Practicing social distancing is how we can all help each other. So there you see, this is again in a social narrative. You're not going to see a hugely long story. I think that was about 14 pages. And the idea focusing on one topic. So in this case, the coronavirus and helping to understand that coronavirus. So how does that look for us as we are doing remote learning? First of all, that piece that I just shared with you is a free ebook that you will have access to. That means that you can not only share it if you have a virtual learning environment, but you can also distribute it if your students are not able to necessarily log in, but hopefully can still get either an email or a copy that you are able to give them. Now, when we talk about how to implement, one of the things that is so valuable with social narratives is opportunities to do one-on-one meetings, where initially, and this is how my son's special education teacher has been doing his one-on-one meetings, she'll literally just share her screen in a particular one-on-one meeting virtual and show a story. And they'll go through it page by page. And one of the things that I've found as in using social stories is that first time I want to read it, actually just read it through. Read the whole story to the student, going page to page. And obviously I didn't just do that. I was talking about some of those slides and pictures as we went along because I wanted to kind of model some of the ways that I do talk about it. But I tend not to do that on the first read. On the first read with students, I want to read aloud the whole story and give them that opportunity to hear the good modeling and to hear how they're doing. Now, what if you're not able to share? Then this is what we want to teach parents that they are able to do, is again, if possible, share that whole piece, family members, any way that that student can have to help. Another thing that I have seen some teachers doing is providing themselves a recording of themselves reading the story that students are able to download. So even if they can't see the teacher virtually one-on-one, they can at least get a recording as they are reading the story so they have that model. Once that first read is done, then it's an ideal time to go back through the story and stop at each page to discuss the content. And even for my son, who is nonverbal, this is a critical piece because he's still able to point to items in the photos, point to key words, and interact. And when he has his voice activation software available, he can also answer some questions with some simple sight words as well. But we want our students to have that opportunity. Think about our English learners, think about our newcomers. It's so critical that we give opportunities for them to express themselves and to use that verbal language. And these provide a wonderful idea, a wonderful opportunity to really do that. Again, the photos are so key because if we have a student who is not going to have the proficient reading, they can still interact with the topic, with the content through those photos. I also really like to see the students getting their own copy of the story so that they have that additional time to practice reading at home and to also share with their family members what they have learned. So I've mentioned my son multiple times now. Here is Alex. Many of you will look here at Alex and go, whoa, you just said he was a 9th grader. And indeed he is. But my son he just turned 15 2 weeks ago, and he is already 6'7" and over 300 pounds. If he had the ability to play football, I'm sure he would have been recruited. But Alex has always been nonverbal. He makes only one sound, which is dia, and we do hear expression in his dias. He will sometimes, have a sense where you can tell he's anxious or he's happy, but he really has only ever had that one sound, despite the fact that we've had speech therapy and occupational therapy from the very get-go. Alex was diagnosed at 20 months, and we started all the therapies right away. But in our case and in our situation, and we all know for our students with special needs, it is about an individual path. We never know where an individual is going to go. For Alex, language has continued to be a challenge for him. So we've moved from PECS, picture exchange communication, to now more of a talk software where he's able to select items. And you can imagine for a student like Alex, who was used to being in a largely self-contained classroom with lots of task boxes, how difficult suddenly this remote learning change has been for him. It has been very challenging for him. He has his iPad, as you can see here, and our district, his special ed teacher, has one-on-one meetings with him on the iPad, and also has class time with all of the students in his class on a regular basis, and Alex will turn in for that, but it is a tiny fraction of what he would have if he was at school. So we have really appreciated having the social narratives that his teacher has introduced to him and then sent to us as files so that we can go over them again with our family, and that repetition is so valuable, especially when it is topics like this that students are struggling to understand. I also want to talk about just where we can get some other resources, because those of us who are working with the most vulnerable students really need all the help and all of the resources we can get. This is a relatively new website. I think it came up about 3 weeks ago, perhaps. 33 special education organizations came together to create this. It is specific to this time, dealing with educating learners during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is called Educating All Learners Alliance. The beauty of this website, whether you're an English learner teacher, or whether you are a special ed teacher, or you are a teacher who's just working with kids who have lots of gaps, I highly recommend going to this website and checking it out, because they've put so much on here. There are free resources, lists of technology tools, and examples from teachers who are moving to remote learning. So it's well worth spending some time on this site. For my teachers out there who are working with English learners specifically, this is a great site, because Texas's Region 11 spent time after the schools started closing getting together modules for at-home teaching. And their English, their ELL coordinator specifically included English learners and lessons for English learners on this site. So this is another great place to go to get some wonderful resources and really just browse and see what would work best for your students. Now, I want to share with you our second free social narrative that you're going to be receiving today, And this is an important one because this helps with that transition. This is where we can really help to communicate to students what all this remote learning is going to look like. Schools have closed. Many leaders have told people to stay at home. Everyone is trying to stop the spread of the coronavirus. And I deliberately created these stories so they really complement each other. So if the students have already learned about the coronavirus, they pick right up here with, okay, because of that, we now have this situation. This is a confusing time. Being at home can be fun, but it can also be lonely. We miss hanging out with friends. Feeling different emotions right now is normal. I really want to stress how important it is that we put this emotion and the social emotional aspect of this time into things like social narratives, because our students are having these feelings. They may be feeling lonely at times. They're missing out. They are sometimes happy because they get to be at home, and other times very sad because things that they had counted on happening this school year simply aren't going to happen. And so giving them an opportunity to reflect and to think about how the feelings and to acknowledge that it's okay to have different feelings is just so important. School buildings may be closed, but your teachers still want you to learn. That means you will be doing schoolwork at home. This is called remote learning. And I think it's always so important for us to help students get to those definitions of words they're hearing over and over again with as simple as definition as possible. Remote learning can mean different things. Your teachers will let you know what you are expected to do. And I think this is important for our students to understand too, that it's not all online, and it may or may not be all handouts and books. It is so different depending on our district. You might have class online. That means you will log in using a computer or mobile device. You will be able to talk to your teachers and classmates this way. You might get assignments to complete at home and send back. This may feel more like homework. Take time to focus on each assignment. Do your best work. Your teachers are still here to help you. They may have office hours where you can check in online. Emailing them is another good way to ask for help. And how important it is that our students know we are still there for them. And how we are there for them may differ from district to district, but letting them know that they can reach out is so critical. Ask an adult in your home to help you set up a place to do your work. Make sure it is a place where you can focus. Gather the supplies you need. Family members or caregivers can help you answer questions about assignments too. I love in social narratives being able to show photos like this one that really model for students what we would like to see, what's an ideal, what would we like to see happen. We'd like them to have their own place to work. We'd like them to be able to have the supplies they're going to need there. We'd like them to know that they have people in their family they can reach out to for additional help. Plan to spend some time each day reading. We sure hope they do. This will help keep your mind active. You might have books at home to read. There are articles and books online too. And I want to note that in addition to these 2 free social stories that you'll have that students could practice reading, there are a number of places now that are offering free ebooks. And if you have questions about that, I know that Saddleback's customer service is keeping up with a lot of those opportunities for where you can get ebooks. This is a tough time for everyone. Teachers and students are all figuring out how to make remote learning work. It's okay to ask questions. Share how you are feeling with your teachers and family. Plan to spend time each day working just like you would at school. Do your best. Remember, I think this is so important for all of us to remember. Remember, this is not forever. Schools will open again when the virus is under control. You will be ready for that day by doing your schoolwork at home now. So, I really, as we talk about these social narratives, you have the understanding the coronavirus and the remote learning narratives that are yours free. You'll see in your control panel, you can download them right now. They are your ebooks, free to share and use. We hope that they're helpful. But we also want to just remember that we need each other. So we have a chat and question and answer feature in there, and I would just love to hear from you how you might be helping each other or ways that you're connecting. So I encourage you, if you have a moment right now, to just take a second and go into that chat feature and type just a couple, 3 words, but how are you looking out for each other in your district, with other teachers? How are you connecting? We need to share. This is such an important time for us to recognize that we are not an island, that we are not going to do everything we want to do by ourselves. We really have to find out from each other. And I would love to just see that chat explode with lots of different ideas. As you're typing, this quote to me is an important thing for us to hold on to right now. I shall pass this way but once. Any good that I can do or any kindness I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Wow. I think about this quote really right now being so critical, because we have so many people who are angry, feeling desperate, and also people who are worried, who may be sick. This is a time when supporting each other, when finding ways to be good to each other, is just such an important part of time. So
Jill, I jumped in here, Jill, because I just wanted to share some of the, yeah, sorry, this is unplanned. I'm being a little spontaneous, getting crazy over here at the webinars.
Spontaneity is great.
Jumping in. People are just sharing, and by the way, the Q&A feature works well for this. If you go to the Q&A feature and just drop in anything you're doing right now to like connect with your colleagues and look out for each other, we'd love to see more of your responses. I see a lot of things like we call and text each other daily, virtual happy hours, collaborating on Google Classroom. What else do I see here? Virtual PLTs. Connecting with each other through regular Zoom meetings. So yeah, just a lot of great contributions here. Oh, here's some more. This is so cool. Okay. Teachers and admin and students are connecting through WebEx Teams and meetings. So definitely it sounds like a lot of people, both professionally and personally, are using those WebEx and Zoom sort of platforms to connect with each other on collaborating for the students, but also just to kind of be there for each other for venting and emotional support. So just wanted to share what some people were saying. So I'll go away now and let you finish.
I want to say thank you to everybody for sharing. I think this is just so important that we are there for each other right now. So thank you for sharing some of those things and giving some more ideas to everybody. Liz, I love that you broke in there. So this is our gift to you. And that is that all of you who have attended the webinar today have these 2 books you just saw for free. They are in your control panel. You can download them, use them, share them. You'll see in the copyright that you have that right to share them. That's something we want to see you doing. And then they also are going to be on saddleback.com for 99 cents each if there are colleagues who didn't attend the webinar but who would be interested. And they can always attend the webinar by getting on our website and going to our webinars. I don't know if you are maybe aware or not, but we record all of our webinars, which means you can go online to our website at any time and re-watch the strategy webinars and the different types of topics that we have covered, anything from fluency to phonics to reading comprehension to the remote learning webinars that we've been doing of late. And so you can always log in and watch those again at your own time frame. So Liz, I think you want to tell them a little bit about what's coming next week.
Yes, I sure do. So first of all, thank you, Jill, for presenting this great information. People are really thrilled with having access to these ebooks, and they are just really, really excited. So thank you very much. We do have a lot of questions that people have submitted that we will get to in a minute, but as usual, before we get to the Q&A, we want to give you a preview of what is on deck for next week with our Saddleback webinars. So next week, Dr. Brandy Ramirez will be joining me, and we are going to talk about using technology tools to teach reading comprehension strategies, because as we know, the future is a little bit uncertain right now in terms of what instruction is going to look like through the summer for extended year and also into the fall. We don't know how long this virtual learning is going to how long it's going to last. We don't know if we'll be able to go back to schools full-time, part-time. There are just so many questions right now. So we want to put your mind at ease by talking to you about some great tried and true reading strategies that we know work in a classroom and that can be paired easily with technology tools so that if we are still in a remote situation, you'll still be able to use these great classic reading strategies. So this is a very exciting one. If you want to register as soon as we get off this webinar, you can go to our website, sdlback.com/webinar series, but you'll also receive an email too about this prompting you to register. So we hope you can join us next week. And with that, let's get to some questions. Jill, we had some really good ones. First of all, a question that kept popping up over and over again, people were seeking clarification on the appropriate grade levels for these stories. Are they elementary appropriate as well? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I always am gonna write kind of through this lens of the students that I know oftentimes don't get age-respectful kinds of curriculum and texts. So you'll see in those books lots of photos of students who may be middle school, high school, but these are absolutely age appropriate for elementary too, because they are about what is happening right now. So if you've got an elementary student who's asking, you know, why are schools closed? What does the virus mean? These are great resources to use with those younger students as well, because the topics themselves are just so topical for right now and important for right now. And all of the photos, what we find with our younger kids is they have no problem looking at photos of older students. Sometimes our older students don't like having books that have lots of pictures of younger students, but our younger ones don't seem to have any problem with looking at photos and seeing some older students. So yes, these would absolutely be appropriate for elementary as well.
Perfect. And another question on implementation. So this attendee would like you to recap. He or she wants to make sure that their understanding is clear. So the first read is modeled by the teacher. The teacher goes back to interact with the book with the student, like a Q&A.
Yes.
The second read is by the student alone?
So I think that's a good question. So the second read really is that going back and doing what I call the guided or interactive reading. So the first read is that modeled reading from beginning to end. The second one is where I would really highly suggest going back and doing guided reading. So you're still reading, perhaps depending on the student's ability, it could be the student reading to you and then discussing. It could be you and the student reading together in a choral kind of reading situation, or it could be you modeling again. But the key is to then talk about it. Just talk about what the students notice, see, and if they are nonverbal, to find ways for them to still interact with that text. Maybe by indicating things in the photo or pointing to key words, or if they have a touch talk kind of system to be able to use that. Then the third read is really where I would then want the student to be as independent as possible. So again, this is so dependent on the individual student. My son, obviously being totally nonverbal, is not going to necessarily read it out loud on his own ever. We would just get a series of dias. But I know that I have the copy at home so that that third read, he and I can work on it together. His sister can come in and do a read with him. And really, as many repetitions as possible are only going to help with building his vocabulary and being able to interact with the book. So hopefully that clarifies. Great question.
It does, and you actually within that answer answered the next question, which was how can I support nonverbal students with social narratives? So you already kind of talked about that, but did you want to add anything before we jump over to a new question?
Well, obviously I love that question because I live it right on a daily basis with a child who's nonverbal. That is the beauty of social narratives. They are short, they're to the point, and they are visual. So if your student is nonverbal, they are a great tool for working with that student because you can perhaps be reading to them. I've also seen, where if you record key sentences for in the students' talk, touch kind of programs they may have, then they can use that talk touch to read the lines with their help. So there are other ways that you can help with those students who are nonverbal, but it really is so dependent on the student themselves. So one of the things that we'll often do with my son, because he's very much a student who needs the manipulatives, is to then take kinds of sentences from the stories and we'll actually make them on their own cards. And this, obviously, in this remote learning kind of place, that means the family has to be okay with making some of these manipulatives, or a teacher could make them little cards with the different words, and then the student can put those sentences together. That's another way that I often work with my son and with our students who are nonverbal, is helping them to manually construct the sentences, which also helps us just to work again with that language.
I think we have time for one more, and this one is regarding parents. So what are some ways to explain the stories to parents so that they can share them with their children? We know a lot of parents out there are trying to get involved, and teachers are trying to give parents ways to get involved during this new situation we're in. So any thoughts on parents' involvement?
Yeah, the more that we can share out to parents, the better. So the beauty of a social narrative, and again, these books that you are able to download from today's webinar are totally permissible for you to share and to send to those parents. We want that to happen. We want them to be of help. And so these particular social narratives, one of the things I like to do when I'm talking with parents is again focus on those key elements of social narratives, that they are visual and positive and help to explain something that a student is struggling to understand. So here, of course, we're all sort of struggling to understand what the coronavirus is. We are all together trying to figure out how to make remote learning work. But you will see social narratives that are available out there for behaviors, for things that parents may really be struggling with right now. If you are a parent of a child that has a lot of behavioral issues, that is on perhaps a positive behavior plan at school, and that parent isn't sure how to implement all of those kinds of routines and cues that teachers have had that student be familiar with, you may be struggling with certain behaviors that are challenging to the family. That's where something like a social narrative is a brilliant solution to help parents understand that I want that to, I can write the narrative and or as a teacher and really be specific to what positive behaviors I want to see from a student. And that can be a huge help to parents to be able to hear from the teacher, okay, here are some ways. So one of the things I love about social narratives is they can actually be a real bridge between teachers and parents. When parents say, hey, I'm struggling with this or this behavior or this topic, and then the teacher can help in helping to find that social narrative that might be a bridge for that. So, you know, the thing with parents though is, again, to focus on the fact that we want to be positive in these, and we want to definitely note the visuals and talk about how we are going to approach this in a real proactive kind of way.
Awesome advice. Thank you so much, Jill. I want you to know that if we didn't get to your question, we always make an effort to get to your questions offline. So if you have a burning question and we weren't able to answer it during this broadcast, don't worry. We tend to follow up fairly quickly with any questions that were remaining. And it seems like there were quite a few regarding perhaps how this would apply with English learners and newcomers. So you will be hearing from us around those. So this is how you can find out some more information from Jill. As I said earlier, she is our Director of Literacy, and this is her email address here. And Jill, I mean, you are very open to receiving emails from people. Otherwise, we wouldn't have your email out here. So
right. If they
Jill
have a
would love
question, they're welcome to email me. And then,
Absolutely.
of course, I know, like you said, Liz, I know we didn't talk as much, although I mentioned at times the English learners and newcomers. I'm not surprised that there's a number of questions about that. And you know, the key here again is using the recognition that our English learners and newcomers also need that visual, the positive, the understanding of something that is difficult for them is just as important as our students with special needs, to recognize that we have to find a way to help them understand. And that's where social narratives can be so powerful for our English learners and newcomers. But the difference sometimes is that we may have some additional language goals that we have, where we want to pre-teach some of the vocabulary or use some of that to really start to enrich some of their both verbal and written vocabulary. So I love the fact that we have the questions, Liz, because we can definitely respond to that in writing.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you for joining us once again. This is where you can find us. We love to hear from you on Twitter or Facebook. You can reach out to us via email, contact@sdlback.com. We are always interested in helping you out and answering your questions. And of course, if you have questions about Saddleback books and products, we're definitely here to help you with that. So please reach out to us on by any of these means: social media, telephone, or email. We're happy to help you with that. And beyond that, I think we just want to say thank you, and hopefully we will see you on next week's webinar. And thank you for spending a part of your day with us once again. Goodbye, everybody.
Absolutely. And just remember, we can do this. Thank you, everybody.